Look, this pollution market was made in India. It was tested in India. It succeeded in India. And just as pollution doesn't respect borders, ideas do not respect borders. I think until the people demand it, I think that's the first step moving towards a cleaner environment. Once the people demand it, governments are quite capable of responding. Yes, you're going to need engineering insights to reduce the pollution at the factory, but you got to have economic incentives so that the factory wants to do it. The average person in India, according to some research that the Energy Policy Institute, which I direct, put out, is having their life expectancy shortened by about 3.5 years due to the levels of particulate matter relative to having clean air quality at the level the World Health Organization sets.
Welcome to Planet People Profit. I'm your host Sudipto Dey. Can laws of economics and market forces help curb industrial emissions? Can India create a market to clean up air pollution? We asked our guest, Professor Michael Greenstone from University of Chicago, an expert in environment regulations. His studies focus on global energy challenges, the need for protecting public's health from air pollution, and minimizing the damages caused by climate change. Professor Michael Greenstone, welcome to the podcast.
It's my great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You know, Michael, you are in India at a time when pollution is become a talking point now. You know, cities across India are on a very severe pollution, at a very severe pollution level. We have seen protests in the streets of Delhi. You know, people asking for clean air. I'm pretty sure policymakers are taking note of that. And you have been a person who has who understands the pollution markets, applied the laws of economics to the pollution market. You know, could you help us understand, you know, the pollution markets, how have they evolved? Can you help us understand how pollution markets could also help the industry and the businesses, you know, in terms of, I would say, crudely put, make money out of emissions?
Sure.
You know, should we first start with your journey?
Sure.
Into the environmental, I would say, research. Can you take us through your journey? How did you land up here?
Yeah. So when for way too long of my life, I was very devoted to basketball. And I played in high school and I played in college, and, you know, I was perfectly fine, but I really wanted to be great. And I remember my professors in college would come to me periodically like, you know, maybe you should spend a little bit more time on economics. You're spending an awful lot of time on basketball. You're not that tall, you don't jump that high, you're not that fast, like, it's probably not going to work out. And it took me several years to hear them, but eventually I kind of made my way to economics. And I grew up in Chicago, in a neighborhood where there was a lot of poverty. And I thought for sure that, or the reason I went to graduate school was to kind of study the causes of poverty and how can you get people to move out of poverty and to lead fuller lives and things like that. And what is very typical for graduate students is there's this moment, the coursework is for the first 2 years, and then after that, suddenly, oh, you're supposed to have a great idea that's going to help the world or understand the world better. And it was the case of many grad students in my third year. I didn't have any ideas. I had a bunch of ideas that seemed kind of trite or really grandiose ideas that I had no real way to try to answer. And so I kind of struggled with that for most of the year. And then kind of by random chance, I ran into this feature of the way that the US Clean Air Act law is written. And I had all these tools from labor economics and I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's all these great questions in environmental economics, and there's these features of the way that the laws have been applied in the US that would allow us to answer some basic questions like how much did the air improve? How expensive were they? And I just saw this arbitrage opportunity, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this out. And then kind of one thing led to another. And, you know, 25 years later, kind of all I do is study energy, environmental economics. But it was like totally an accident that I ran into this one feature that I had failed as I'd failed as a basketball player, I'd failed as a labor economist, and then I found this one feature of the Clean Air Act, and I was like, I think we could learn something interesting here.
Interesting. Like as they say, there's always a learning. I think your failures teach you more than...
Yes. Well, you surely are. I don't know about you, but like I remember the failures much more than the victories. The failures never go out of my head. The victories just...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you've researched a lot on the pollution market, on the emissions market, applied the laws of economics to those markets.
Yeah.
For a person on the street, pollution is a lived experience. Especially if you are in India, cities across India are going through a severe level of pollution. Yeah. Can you take us through, how do the laws of economics apply to the pollution and the pollution markets?
Okay, so let me just back up. I think one thing is, and maybe this is a little bit from my background, I care about the environment, but I don't care about it any more than anything else that influences human well-being. And so I don't think humans were put on this planet to have a clean environment in and of itself. We're on this planet to lead full and happy lives. And the environment is an important determinant of that, but so is economic progress and advances in material well-being and being able to take your family on vacation and pay for your kids to go to school and things like that. And so, my starting point is some rule or approach to regulation that does not pay any attention to the economic side of it, the cost to industry, the cost to consumers. That's not working. People aren't going to want it. It's not good for people. And that what you really have to find is a way to balance between those two goals of economic advancement and clean environment. And so what is so powerful about pollution markets is that they really provide what I think is the best way to achieve that balance. And so if we're going to talk about India in particular, I think it's important to kind of level set on what the status quo form of regulation is. So the status quo regulation is kind of what the US and other countries used several decades ago. It's called command and control. I, the regulator, say to you, the plant, you must install this equipment, you must meet this standard, and you have to do it the way I say. And what that does is it ignores that different plants are different, or industries are different from each other. And it also removes their innovativeness in finding ways to achieve the environmental goal. And so that's kind of the status quo. And it leads to a very adversarial relationship, understandably, between industry and government. In contrast, what pollution markets do is they say, you know what we want for a big group of industries is we want to keep their total pollution from industry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to some level, and then say, we're going to get out of the way. You industry, figure it out. You're very smart, you're creative, you exist, so you must be innovative. You figure out the best way to get there. And if it means that industry 1 does a lot of pollution and industry 2 cuts their pollution by an enormous amount, that's fine. We don't care. It's not that everyone has to achieve the same standard. And so that's kind of the basis of the idea, which is that it kind of reduces the economic costs while still setting a vigorous and environmental goal or goal for clean air.
Interesting. So we find a lot of policymakers frame development like it's more of a frame, especially when they come to the pollution, this thing, they talk about the fact that either you want growth or you want pollution.
Yes.
Growth and pollution, you can't have it's a either or situation. Okay, you want growth, then pollution is something that comes along with that.
Yeah.
So you're not framing in that. You're not looking at that framework. Is that right?
So, but I think they're exactly right that those are both important goals.
Okay.
And the way regulation has been traditionally pursued, it does pit them against each other.
Okay.
What markets do, and now let me talk about this experiment that we conducted with the Gujarat Pollution Control Board, my colleagues and we designed a pollution market in Surat where it would apply. There were 300 textile industries, and this was really brave and laudable for the Gujarat Pollution Control Board. They agreed with our suggestion. Hey, we're going to have to convince people that this actually worked or didn't work, and that should be tested in the most rigorous way. And so we took the 300 industries, we put them a random number generator and gave each one a number, and based on that number, half of them were put into this new pollution market, and half of them continued to be regulated in the status quo way. Okay. And then we tracked those industries over the next several years. And the results were they surprised me. They were deeply remarkable. The first is, in the status quo, it is so complicated and hard for the regulator to enforce the rules all the time that you have firms who are not complying with the standard as a kind of regular feature. In the market, there was 100% compliance. So just as a law and order thing, the market is really successful at getting people to follow the rules. The second thing is industry emissions went down by 20 to 30% in the market. And the third thing is, and this is very important, industry compliance costs went down by 11%. So you had a win-win, which you a friend of mine who is an investment banker, so his job is to raise money for companies, said to me once, Michael, if someone's trying to give you money, you should let them do that. And so if someone's trying to give you a win-win, you should let them do that. And so that's what pollution markets offer, is an opportunity to make progress on both of those important goals, be it environmental quality and allowing industry to flourish and grow and increase profits and hire more people and expand operations. And what came out of this experiment in Surat was that we had a win-win. And by the halfway through the experiment, industries who were in the status quo, they had randomly been assigned, they were calling the regulator and saying, hey, we would like to be in the market too. Why is it that these guys get to be in the market? That's very unfair. And it completely changed the dynamic from this adversarial relationship between the regulator and industry to one where they were kind of both pulling in the same direction.
Very interesting. So this was the first time that such a pilot was done?
So it's the first time anywhere in the world there was a pollution market for particulates pollution, which is the form of pollution that is outside the door here and is causing all these health problems. And it's also the first time that it was ever a market was evaluated in this with this kind of randomized control trial way. Now, there have been markets before. They have almost entirely been in Europe and the U.S. And so, maybe the deepest question that was underneath this experiment in Gujarat was, can a pollution market work in the global South? And the answer was a resounding yes. I think that was surprising to some people, but that gave the regulator in Gujarat and in other states a lot of confidence that this is something that could be brought elsewhere.
Tell me one thing in terms of India's regulations of the environmental regulation framework. From where we are, and if we are to move towards a better regulated, better monitored environmental regulation framework, what is the pathway that?
Okay, so I've thought a lot about this. I've been working in India for more than 2 decades. I think, so one thing, there's a phrase in the legislation that set up the Clean Air Act in the U.S., which is to protect the public health. Okay, it's kind of innocuous, anodyne phrase. It turns out to be really important. Because regulation generally has costs for industry. And to protect the public health identifies that there's a benefit to having regulation. And so then that leads to, well, how do we find the right balance between those two? And that phrase is missing from the Indian legislation. And I think the spirit of that is sometimes missing from the application of the regulation as well, which is, it's not a technical issue, or it's treated like a technical issue. We should get this weird measurement of PM 2.5.
You mentioned about the global South, and this whole experiment took place in the global South, and people are surprised by the outcome of this experiment.
Yeah.
But in terms of the application of economic laws in global South and in developed markets, are the applications sort of different? I'm going to say in terms of does the economics play out differently?
No, it's the same thing. What you do with a pollution market is you set a cap that is a total allowable level of pollution that all the industries inside the market are collectively allowed to pollute. That's lower than they would do without regulation. And so now pollution emissions are scarce. And once you do that, you create economic value from that. And that allows the firms to basically, who can innovate by reducing their emissions, to make money. And the firms who find it very expensive to reduce their emissions, they can buy from the firms who reduce. And so the basic economics is exactly the same.
So are there examples in developed markets where pollution markets have worked?
Yes. So in fact, maybe we'll come back to my personal history for a minute. So the most famous example was the US had a sulfur dioxide market that had a terrible acid rain problem in the 1980s. And so they set up a sulfur dioxide market, and that was enormously successful. It reduced pollution. The cost of compliance were much less than people had predicted.
Okay.
Pollution emissions went way down. It was a wild success. And then that kind of led to a flowering of pollution markets all over the US and in Europe and some other developed countries. Just as a little pause, I worked for President Obama in the White House in his first year, and I went there to work on developing a cap and trade market or a pollution market for carbon dioxide that somewhat infamously failed. And so I left there and I had cap and trade or pollution markets on the brain, and I wanted to return to my work in India. And so that's kind of the genesis of this idea of this Surat market. I was so upset that this hadn't worked in the US. I was like, well, we should try it here. But let me just make one other point. One thing that I found very strange is you have this excellent regulatory tool which balances the needs of industry and economic growth with the needs for environmental quality. And it was only being applied in the parts of the world where there wasn't that much pollution. It seemed like a complete misapplication. 82% of greenhouse gas emissions over the remainder of the century are projected to come from outside the OECD. The countries with the highest levels of conventional air pollution, PM 2.5, are almost all in the global South. And I just thought, and my colleagues and I just thought, my goodness, this is an opportunity. We have this great tool. Why isn't it being applied where the problem is the greatest? And that's kind of the genesis of starting this work in Gujarat.
But, what we have observed, and policymakers and politicians, they do underestimate the social cost of air pollution. We've seen that in developing markets.
Yeah.
In India too.
Yeah.
If people would not have come down to the streets to protest, had the policymakers and the politicians been more conscious of the air quality.
Yeah.
So how does it do you agree with that assessment that policymakers now need to be much more conscious of the fact that air pollution is something that
I think about that every time I come here, and it's almost like it's a postcard from a U.S. perspective. It's like almost a postcard from the 1970s of the U.S., which was very similar.
Okay.
Lots of air pollution. In Gary, Indiana, which is a city that's 30 miles from where I live, in the late 1960s, white collar workers, that is workers who would bring a second shirt to work because by midday the first shirt would be so dirty from the pollution. So how did that happen? Now Gary is very clean, Chicago is very clean, Los Angeles is very clean. And so that happened there. It happened in Europe. It happened in Japan. It happened in China. I think no matter the exact form of government, and I'm not saying the relationship is always direct, but governments generally go where the people want them to.
Okay.
And I think there has not, my own view is that there has not been enough pressure and demand put on policymakers in India to really make this a first order priority. And it's very striking, India is the world's largest democracy. China is not considered to be as democratic as India is maybe one way to say it. And yet it was pressure from the people about a decade ago that caused China to announce its war on pollution that has been enormously effective at reducing pollution. So I think until the people demand it, there will, I think that's the first step towards moving towards a cleaner environment. And if I could just connect it to what we've been talking about with markets, once policymakers want to do something about it, they have to have a way to do it that doesn't compromise their other goals. And that's where the pollution markets can come in.
So you're saying that, so this experiment that you did in Surat has worked, has shown the world that pollution market can exist, can happen in a developing setup, where regulations may or may not be that stringent, but it also requires the fact that monitoring is important. And if you see most of these places, monitoring in India, monitoring is something you talk to industry, you talk to people on the other side, and is something which is on the it's not high on the agenda of many policy planners, policy makers. We have lots of laws here, environmental regulation laws. But when it comes to monitoring, it comes to implementation, is something which, there's a lot of gaps out here. You think India could fall prey to that?
I think a lot of it comes down to political will.
Okay.
And if there's not great political will, there's a greater tolerance of gaps. But once there's political will, the system usually responds to that, sometimes not immediately and sometimes a little bit awkwardly. I think, people don't really want to hear about, it's complicated to install this monitoring equipment or that. They just want the air to be cleaner. And so when that kind of clarity of focus comes bearing down, then I think governments historically have responded. It certainly happened, as I said, in the United States, in Europe, Japan, China. Once the people demand it, governments are quite capable of responding.
So what you're saying is basically there's a model out there which has been proven model in terms of the pilot has been successful, accepted globally, and it's in India now. It's happened in India. So it's in a sense something that happened in India, which could proven, tested. You think there's a possibility of taking it outside India now?
So let me say this, as an American, I will say this somewhat reluctantly because it's a little cultural appropriation, but look, this was made, this pollution market was made in India.
Okay.
It was tested in India. It succeeded in India. And you cannot, just as pollution doesn't respect borders, ideas do not respect borders.
Yes.
And what has happened in Gujarat is now spreading, and you can't stop it. The state of Maharashtra saw it, and they said, well, why not us? And they contacted my colleagues and I and said, could you help us design a sulfur dioxide market for statewide, not for just one city? We're working with them. I expect that will launch in 2026. The state of Rajasthan, we're also working with them. And this idea and this proof is now, it's spreading outside India. And then there's discussions with other countries. What started in this, Surat is a big town, but it's not the biggest town in the world, some knowledge was created and like a proof of concept that I think was missing. And this really seems to be taking off.
But one criticism of pilot projects is that, pilots look good, but when it comes to scaling them up, they remain, there's always a question mark about scaling pilots up.
Okay.
How do you
I've thought a lot about this, and it's very important question. Academics are good at some things and not so good at other things. And I had this great worry once we had these results, like, am I really going to be so good at scaling at scaling. I'm good at designing experiments. I'm good at my colleagues and I are good at designing experiments. And I want to just shout out to my three co-conspirators from the very beginning, Rohini Pandey, Nick Ryan, and Anant Sudarshan, who are close friends and colleagues. We're good at all that. I don't know if we're going to be so good at scaling, which means really like interacting with political people and industry and making them feel comfortable. And so what we did is we started a new organization called Emission to Market Accelerator.
Okay.
And I am the co-chair kind of on the science side of it. My friend and colleague Bala Srinivasan is the other co-chair, and its executive director is Kaushik Deb. And what that organization has a different set of skills than the researchers have. And I think that's part of the proof will be in the pudding, but that is, do these markets scale? But it was very conscious that like, just because we're good at one thing doesn't mean we're going to be good at the other.
Interesting. But tell me, you would have known this and have studied this thoroughly, but why do environmental regulations fail? When it comes to a person on the street, everybody's aware, conscious of the pollution, everybody's conscious of but everybody says, okay, yeah, we know laws are there, regulations are there.
Okay,
they're not working. Why do they fail?
Two things. One, we've been talking about the political will.
Sure.
So the regulator has to feel that this is important.
Okay.
You have to get that message from the politicians. The second thing is, suppose they want to do something, they have to have tools on the shelf that are effective.
Absolutely.
And I think I think air quality and environmental problems in India, as with many other parts of the world, have often been treated kind of as an engineering problem.
Okay.
Like we have to get this parameter right. We want this many micrograms per cubic meter. This is all this kind of language that normal human beings don't understand and care about. But like very engineering style. We're going to put this piece of equipment on the stack, or we're going to get the factory to buy this particular machine, and everything will be great. That's not enough. You have to take the economics seriously.
Okay.
And it's not enough to mandate technologies. There has to be an economic incentive to use them. And what these pollution markets have done is, I think it's the platonic ideal of the combination of engineering and economics. Yes, you're going to need engineering insights to reduce the pollution at the factory, but you got to have economic incentives so that the factory wants to do it. And these markets are very good at combining those two. And so I think what has been missing is treating it purely as an engineering problem. Can I just give you one favorite example? When I worked in the White House, there was this program to install smart meters.
Okay.
That tells you how much electricity you're using, and in principle, you could.
We're doing right now. India, there's a rollout of smart meters.
In the engineering side of the Department of Energy in the U.S., I said to them, hey, how are we going to figure out if these things are working? And they said to me with a straight face, they said, oh, we're going to count the number of smart meters that are installed. And that's like an engineering perspective. Did the machine go there? Yes, the machine was there, mission accomplished. No, but that's not why you have smart meters. You have smart meters so that they can help alter people's behavior.
Yeah.
And so you have to have the economics part of it built into it as well. And so the analogy is to the markets as well.
You need incentives.
Yeah, you need incentives. And if you don't have the incentives, you can mandate all the technology you want in the world, and it's not really going to work.
Incentives work in households also.
Yes.
If I know my electricity bill is going to come down, I'll use LED. And this happened in India.
Yes.
There's been you don't get the usual bulbs, filament bulbs. They're out of production now. So
yes, I'm reluctant to you say households. You're daring me to talk about my children. Yes, I can use moral suasion with my children. And they would be better people if they did this, that, the other thing. But sometimes you need to combine that with some incentives for that.
Absolutely.
And it hurts me deep down that my moral rhetoric is not enough to always get them to see the right thing to do. But I have to be a realist about it.
I hear you because I go through that.
Yeah.
I have a teenager at home.
Yes. It's like day after failure.
Yes. From an industry perspective, if you tell a businessman there's an incentive to reduce your emissions.
Yeah.
You know, if you reduce your emissions, there'll be incentive
You
to
make money.
You make money.
Yes.
You know, that message. Do you think that message has not gone through to the industry enough?
Well, there's no reason it should have gone through until there was a market, because it wasn't true. Without a market, it was just, you must do this expensive thing.
Yeah. More compliance, I would say. It was more of a top-down approach where you say you comply with X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And here you're really creating an incentive for industry to want to do it, and you get a completely different perspective from industry.
Has there been any sort of change in behavior, attitude of industry you've seen, because you have been with this project for some time now, you know, and you've seen in the behavior of industry towards this?
So when this started, there was great reluctance from industry. They were like, could you please look over there, like, just leave us alone. We're doing fine. And, you know, it was really the leadership of the Gujarat Pollution Control Board that's convinced industry, no, this is happening. And the change in attitude was really remarkable. Some of the biggest advocates for these pollution markets in Gujarat now is industry, who are saying, you know, this allows us to make money. I think another thing that we didn't talk about in the status quo form of regulation is what happens in the status quo currently when industries violate. It's very clunky. So there's basically a giant sledgehammer that the pollution control boards can bring down on them, which is they can shut them down. And they don't want to do that. People's lives and jobs are there.
Exactly.
And so they're very reluctant to do it. And there's kind of nothing between like wagging your finger and shutting down. And for industry, that's kind of like a very nerve-wracking way to live. Either I'm just going to have some guy wag their finger at me, or I'm going to get shut down. I really don't want to get shut down. And so this provides a lot more certainty. The goal is clear. And you know, the industries have proven themselves very creative at finding ways to reduce pollution in inexpensive ways.
So what is the rollout plan going forward like?
So as I said, the ideas don't respect borders. The Gujarat Pollution Control Board they took all the control firms and put them in the market in Surat. Then they started a second market for particulate matter in Ahmedabad. And then they kind of have the bug now. They said to us, well, we'd like to start a water effluent trading market. And so we're working with them on that. And we're working with them on setting up a statewide sulfur dioxide market. And that, I think that would be quite revolutionary. It would be the whole state. It would be in Surat, it's primarily textile firms. This would be very big firms, power plants and things like that. Simultaneous in Maharashtra, which I mentioned, they're also trying to set up a sulfur dioxide market, and we're helping them do that. And that will launch sometime in 2026, and they are just going full steam ahead. So I think, you know, out of this made in India, tested in India, proven in India, like the idea is spreading, and governments do want to do something about pollution. They just don't want it to be, you know, unitarily focused on that with ignoring the economic side. And this provides a path forward.
How about taking this experiment outside India?
Yeah, so this emissions market accelerator that we have started to expand the use of pollution markets in the global south. I'll say this looking at my shoes somewhat quietly because I'm a little embarrassed about it, but I mean it. We want to have 1 billion people by 2030 experiencing a cleaner environment and reduce compliance costs for industry around the world by 2030. And we are in conversations with governments in other countries around the world. And in fact, our aim is in 2026 to announce a global call for governments to apply to work with us to help set up a market. So kind of a pollution market fund.
A pollution market fund, you said?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So in terms of, so there will be other stakeholders, I presume, right?
Yeah.
So are you bringing in funders, people, or as you mentioned about the bankers, funders, financiers into this? Like,
so So there's NEML is kind of a partner for setting up the markets, and they have been a fellow traveler throughout this, and they've been a terrific partner. I think like the Surat market and the Ahmedabad market remain, somewhat modest in size. I think the next step, there's two next steps in the Indian case. One is, will government want to bring in financial traders into these markets? Right now, it's only the industries that can trade among themselves for the right to pollute, but financial traders can provide liquidity and help with price discovery and all kinds of things like that to make these markets work more efficiently. So I think there's an opportunity for that. I think the regulators first want to get the basics right before they introduce that. And then the second, in the United States, there's a very famous quote that states are the laboratory for government. And there's an element of this too, because this is starting at the state level. And I think there would be an opportunity if Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan and other states start getting their sulfur dioxide markets up and running, of kind of linking those markets together. And that would provide all kinds of benefits for industry. You would have greater cost savings, and in principle, you could also have greater reductions in pollution. And since sulfur dioxide travels so far when it goes up in the air and turns into PM 2.5, it would have just massive benefits for people in India. And I should have said this at the top. I want to say it. The average person in India, according to some research that the Energy Policy Institute at Chicago, which I direct, put out, is having their life expectancy shortened by about 3.5 years due to the levels of particulate matter relative to having cleaner air quality at the level the World Health Organization sets. So I just want to pause. Like 3.5 years is a lot.
Yes.
And the potential for gains in terms of human well-being, and 3.5 years is a number, but that's like your brother, your friend, your daughter, like leading shorter and sicker lives. And so like now that there is an opportunity to have a regulatory tool that does not run counter to the need for economic growth, there's this massive gain for human well-being that is there waiting to be grabbed.
Absolutely. In terms of the India, for example, in the carbon markets, it could help us understand the correlation between the pollution market, the carbon markets, and the emissions market. Because what's happening right now is, in the last couple of years, quite a few regulations have come in the carbon markets. 2026 is the when I think we're going to see much more structured taking off of the carbon markets in India. How does that sort of come into play?
I think that is an important. So thus far, we have been working on kind of conventional pollutants. Carbon is obviously the molecule of CO2 that is released in Mumbai versus one that's released in Los Angeles has the same effect on the world. This is a great step forward for India to begin to address CO2. The degree to which it wants to do that, how stringent that wants to be, that will ultimately be up to the government of India to determine. But I think beginning to develop the muscle of regulating CO2 is an important step, and one that is going to have to be evaluated and traded off against other goals.
Is there any sort of, you have seen carbon markets very closely across the globe. Do you have any sort of observations for the Indian policymakers as they roll out the guardrails of regulations for carbon markets?
Yeah, so I think the carbon markets that have been most successful around the world are a little bit different than the one that is emerging here in India, which is kind of a performance-based standard. A carbon market, the carbon markets that have been most successful, rather than having a performance-based standard, and that's a wonky phrase, they really just focus on CO2 directly, not CO2 divided by economic activity or output or something like that, but really just on CO2. Just like in Surat, all they care about is total emissions of particulates. I think this is what they're setting up as an important first step, an even more efficient version that would impose fewer costs on the Indian economy is one that would focus only on CO2.
But you see carbon becoming a currency now, for emissions trading, for, a lever for, economic lever for, impacting pollution, emissions.
Yeah, I think pollution markets are growing, and I think it comes out of a recognition that we care about more than one thing.
Okay.
We care about continued economic progress, and we care about environmental quality. And pollution markets are really the best way forward for balancing between those two goals, as opposed to kind of somewhat maniacally only focusing on one of them.
But in terms of, say, the way Indian regulations are currently, as we move towards a pollution market or a carbon market regime, what sort of regulatory changes would you suggest to the policymakers?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's very hard in every country around the world has had a difficult time with it is to trust the market.
Okay. It takes time.
Yes, it takes time. And so what you often see is kind of like a half-hearted belief in the market.
Okay.
And so what do I mean by that? They'll set up this market, there'll be an overall cap, so collectively you can't emit more than this. But then they're not really sure that's good enough. And so underneath it, they say, oh, by the way, you guys also have to do these other things, like install this particular pollution abatement equipment or something like that, or use this fuel or something. And those other things actually undermine, they make the market more costly than it needs to be. And so I think a challenge for all governments around the world is to be comfortable trusting the markets and leave the engineering side of their brain to the side as much as possible. That doesn't mean the markets don't need to be monitored carefully. That doesn't mean they don't need to be regulated, but you should let the market be its best version of itself. It's a little bit like letting my 19-year-old got her driver's license last summer. It was a close call. She passed by 1 point. I can't be in the car with her all the time. It's not going to help her be a better driver. She's constantly looking at me. And so I let her, drive and on her own, and it's a little scary.
Yeah.
But she is becoming a better driver because of that. And so I think there's an element of that with the markets. We have to let the markets really provide their best.
Let them be,
Yes,
let them
let them be.
And
it doesn't mean we don't monitor them and regulate and make sure that they're operating well, but to throw all these other mandates underneath it, it's just undermining the value of the market.
so what you're saying is that monitoring is important.
Monitoring is critical. There's the foundation of every market.
Yeah, and especially if you're setting up a pollutions market, you're setting up a carbon market.
Yeah.
Monitoring has to be.
It's the first step.
Yeah.
It's the foundation. But you should restrain yourself from then saying, and the way we want you to reduce pollution is by this very particular approach. Let industry figure that out for themselves. They're very good at it.
So you can't do,
So Jessica, yes, you can drive the car, and I'm going to let you do it without me sitting next to you. I'm not going to require that every time you drive the car, I'm there, shaking my head because you almost hit the poor pedestrian or something.
I can so totally empathize with that,
Yeah.
But in terms of, governments, it's difficult for the governments to sort of, come off the pedestal, and because as they say, if you put somebody on the pedestal, that person only looks down upon you.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for the government to come off the pedestal and talk to you as a, eye to eye and at the same level.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm not quite following. What do you mean?
I'm going to say, for policymakers,
letting the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's difficult.
They want control.
They want control.
I want control over Jessica's driving, and yet that is undermining her becoming a good driver.
Exactly. I think that's the same syndrome I think a lot of policymakers and regulators face.
Yeah, it is. And it's not specific to India. That is globally. In the U.S. and the EU, they set up these markets, and then they say, but we're not really sure, so we're also going to require you to do these other things instead of just letting the market sort it out.
Finally, I'd like to ask you, and I'm sort of, Are there any sort of unanswered questions about environmental regulations, that keeps you awake at night? You mentioned about the basketball example.
Yeah.
Are there any other sort of things that, okay, let me try this. Are there any thoughts?
Well, look, with all these markets, yes, this was very successful in Gujarat. I would like to, just because I work there, it's not a law of physics that it has to work elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I would like to see them work in some other places. I think a great unanswered question, maybe there's two. A great unanswered question is, when and why do societies decide to do something about pollution? And now I have this theory, which I've been sharing with you, that once it happens, governments will respond. But I can't tell you exactly what ignites it and what causes it.
Yes.
So that one, that's in the. I wish I understood that better. Mm-hmm. I'll say, as an aside, I did this experiment with day laborers in Delhi, and found that if you explain to them what the health costs of air pollution were, their willingness to pay for clean air went up by a factor of 5.
Yeah.
So I do think information is part of it, and that's very important. I think the second thing, which we haven't talked about, and I want to just widen the aperture, zoom out a little bit here, is we barely touched upon climate change.
Yes.
Climate change that keeps me up at night. It's enormously unequal. The costs, something like 95% of the costs of every ton of CO2 that's emitted are going to fall outside the OECD countries. And then you have most of the emissions, over the 80% of the emissions for the remainder of the century, are going to be outside the OECD countries. And yet you have the OECD countries as the principal source of it today.
Exactly.
This is like a thorny mess. How do you get all these people with these extremely diverse set of interests around the world to come together to kind of reach some collective solution about it? And a thing that bothers me is, in the current setup, it is free, basically free for most people around the world to cause damage to other people by releasing CO2.
Yes.
And you just think about that. Like, if we were neighbors, and at midnight every night I took my trash and I put it over the fence and dumped it in your yard, like, we wouldn't be very happy neighbors for very long.
Absolutely.
You would do something about it. But that's kind of what we're doing right now. And like, the rich countries have historically done that to developing countries. The global south is going to largely be doing it to itself now. And is that okay? Is that like, it's like almost like a sophomore college kind of question. Like, is it immoral to do that? Yes, I think it's immoral. But am I OECD countries, are they going to do something about it? Are they going to say, you know what? We don't actually think that that's okay that we're dumping garbage on our neighbors every night. And I don't know, it's unsettling, but it feels like the answer is that the OECD's kind of, a lot of the world is comfortable with that. Somehow there's like a veil of ignorance, because if I were doing you would catch me on video and you would show me that video and say, but I saw you doing that.
Exactly.
And here there's some kind of veil of ignorance that is like, I can cognitively hold to the side that I am causing these damages. And so I guess one thing that, try to bring this in a little bit, is, are humans capable of recognizing that and acknowledging that with respect to climate change? A, and B, are they willing to do something about it? So like, would I be willing to compensate you for the damages that I was causing you?
COP. The COP 30 was just a couple of months back, and COPs have been around for some time. We've still not yet solved most of the promises or the you think that is there a way that what you said is there a way we could sort of especially the carbon markets or the pollution markets, but as you said, could the COP be a sort of a platform where this could be discussed, talked about?
Okay, So I'm going to, where this is being recorded,
Yes.
so there'll be a record of this. I'm asking you to invite me back when my book on this topic comes out
Okay.
in a year. But let me just give you the brief version.
Sure.
And this is co-authored with my friends and colleagues, Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee. I think we have to move past feelings of guilt, feelings of morality, all these other things, and get to hard, cold transactions that make both sides better.
Okay.
And I think the global South has been like, you've done this to us. It's totally unfair. Like, you have to compensate us. But in a very incoherent and like, what is the right amount of money? Nobody really knows way. And I think we need to move to a system where the OECD countries pay the low and middle income countries for the damages they caused, not in the past, I think that's too hard, but that they're causing today and going forward. Now, imagine running for US Senate on a policy of, I'm going to send a lot of money to India and Bangladesh and Sub-Saharan Africa. It's very, very hard to do.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
so there's got to be something on the other side.
Yes.
Okay, so what would it be on the other side? In exchange, the Global South would adopt pollution taxes or CO2 taxes that are real, meaningful, and are influencing emissions growth from those countries. And I think that there is the contours of a trade there where everyone is better off. And the reason is, the OECD countries, they know all these emissions are coming from the non-OECD countries. Now that what they would be getting is a guarantee that those emissions would be fewer. The Global South, what they would be getting is some compensation for the damages they're receiving. Now, they would like to receive that with no strings attached.
Of course.
But in all deals, you have to give something to get something.
Exactly.
And so what they would be giving is the introduction of carbon pricing and an acknowledgement that their emissions are really going to be very central to what happens to the amount of climate change.
So that's why carbon markets are important, especially for developing countries.
Yes, exactly. And it has to be in a way where it's not expensive for developing countries as a Global South to do.
Michael, I really look forward to your book and,
Okay, but I have a promise. Maybe you'll have me back with Esther and Abhijit here and we can...
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much and thanks for the conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
very good.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, fine.